Hello, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. For anyone I have yet to meet, my name is Deirdre Schreiber, and I'm the Associate Director of Learning and Development in Hewitt. And this is our first Tech Talk of FY26. For folks who are at the IT Summit, in opening remarks, Clara mentioned that we were going to continue the awesome learning and connection that gets started every year at the IT Summit in June, and continue that. We get so many great presentation proposals, and unfortunately, we can't accept everyone. So we're leveraging some of the great proposals we received to bring you Tech Talks throughout the year. So very excited to have Linda Zhang here, who's going to be talking to you all about survey design essentials. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Linda.
All right. Thank you, DJ. Thanks everyone for joining today's workshop on survey design essentials, avoiding bias and maximizing validity. Today we're going to cover three objectives. First is spotting where major biases can occur. There are many biases that could occur, but today we'll focus on major biases that could occur in each step of the natural flow of surveys. And then learn strategies to reduce bias and explore ways to improve the reliability and validity of your survey questions. By the end of the hour, you would have a better idea on some ways to avoid some common errors that occur in surveys by participating in quizzes after every section. And we'll have a Q&A at the end, but if you have any question, feel free to unmute and let me know, or write in the chat so we could summarize it at the end. So let's start by looking at how bias can infiltrate each step of the survey process. First, when you determine who receives your survey, there could be biases such as coverage bias and sampling bias. And then who ultimately respond to your survey may also generate biases. And these biases result in representation error. And if you have these errors and you don't do anything about it, you can't generalize your survey results to the entire target population that you're surveying. So what is representation? It means that your respondents should represent your entire population in key characteristics, such as gender. So for example, if you know that, 48% of your population you're surveying is male, but only 30% of your respondents are male, then your respondents may not be representative. You can use a test to see if this difference is significant. And if so, then your respondents are not representative by gender. Males are underrepresented among your respondents. What about other characteristics? It's important to have your sample mirror the population that in characteristics that are important to your survey topic, correlate with your survey outcome, such as satisfaction with IT services, or essential for your planned analysis, such as by demographics or by school. And so, for example, if you're surveying all staff at about their experiences with Harvard IT services, it's essential to include respondents from each department or school, because their technology needs and usage may differ, and consider characteristics that influence your findings, such as whether they are staff or faculty or student or with different technical expertise. So today we'll use mostly IT examples, but if you're not from IT, you can think about your own examples. So assume that you have gone through these first and second stages of your survey. There's the third stage, how respondents reply to your questions can also generate errors, which is called measurement errors. These errors actually determine whether respondents provide accurate information about your questions. So any questions so far about the three stages of the survey process and an overview of the different errors that could occur in each stage? Okay. If you don't have a question, I have a question for you. let me pull. So the first question is, which of the following statement is true about survey errors? I'll give you a minute to think about it and answer it in the quiz area. I'm going to watch here. Yep. All right, seems like you've done a great job. The correct answer is C. Representation errors can occur during the sampling process, which determines who gets your survey, and response process, which means who actually complete the survey. And the answer B is measurement error determine whether the right people are in your data set, but that is actually the representation error. All right, I'm going to, great job. So now let's look at the major errors in the first stage, which when you decide who gets your survey. There are two key biases, coverage bias and sampling bias. Coverage bias happens if your list, which is your sampling frame, your email list, misses part of your target population. For example, if you let's say Harvard IT rolled out software, like for example, a dashboard software, and they want to survey only those, they want to get feedback on those on the software. So, but they survey only those who have logged in at least once to the software. So this actually misses people who couldn't access the dashboard software due to technical issues or frustration or lack of information, and often those with most urgent feedback. As a result, the survey results will only reflect the experiences of active users, and which will lead to coverage bias and incomplete understanding of user needs and challenges. So the essential question to ask in order to avoid coverage bias is every member of my target population included in my email list, which is my sampling frame? So the strategies to avoid coverage bias is to make sure, of course, your sampling frame, which is your survey email list, includes everyone in your target population, not just those who used your service. And the second way is to share the survey in multiple ways, email, online, campus events, and to reach them as much as possible, and consider all groups, which means all different groups, different demographic groups, and all different types of people. And so the second error is sampling bias. Coverage bias is about who is included in your mailing list. And if you are going to send your survey to everyone in your list, then you do not have a coverage bias. But if you don't want to bombard everyone with many surveys, and you want to choose a subset of your mailing list to invite to your survey, then you may encounter sampling bias. So to prevent for survey fatigue, you would get a subsample. But when you do that, it's important to make sure your sample is truly representative to avoid introducing sampling bias. So So here's an example of not an ideal sampling process. Say we're going to survey, choose a subset out of the 20,000 staff at Harvard. And if you use the name list and choose every third person, this actually may cause a problem if the last names are some last names are clustered together. This could over or underrepresent these groups, which will create sampling bias. The best way is to use random sampling. So the essential question to ask in order to avoid sampling bias is, does every member have an equal probability of being selected into the sample? So here are some strategies to avoid sampling bias. One is to use random sampling techniques, such as using a random number generator and select like the top 50%, which has the lowest number that is generated randomly. The second way is to use stratified sampling, which is even better than the simple sampling technique. Say, for example, if Harvard population, let's say it's 50% male, 50% female, you want your sample to mirror that proportion. And the third way is to avoid convenience samples, such as setting up a table at Science Center and say, you're going to survey everyone who passes by Science Center Plaza this week about the feedback on Harvard's technology. This approach may overrepresent people who spend more time in public spaces, which will lead in biased results. And any questions about coverage bias and sampling bias in the first stage when you send out your survey? Okay, I see a chat. What if there are differences in demographically based characters that are unknown? Someone who grew up in that's a great question, Michael. So if we don't know, then you can check on references based on other universities or paper that are published in related or similar universities. And if there's nothing about it, then you cannot determine statistically whether it is a representative sample. This is only when you know about the population. That's a great question. Any other questions? If not, we're going to have the second quiz. During this first stage, HUIT wants to survey the entire Harvard community about their experience with campus technology services. Which approach would most likely result in both coverage bias and sampling bias? Give you a minute. And I'm going to open up the poll so you can answer it here. Numbers, both coverage and sampling bias. Okay, now, so the correct answer is actually B. The reason is because first, it has coverage bias. Only individuals who, so the answer choice, let me read this. So surveying every third person who calls the IT desk. So this one has coverage bias because anyone who never visit the help desk, they would not have a chance to be included in the survey. So that has coverage bias. Sampling bias. There's also a sampling bias because people who visit the help desk more often, let's say, this week I just have so many issues, I'm calling every day, I would have a better chance to be selected. Remember the sampling, to avoid sampling bias is that everyone would have equal chance to be selected. So if I visit more often, I have a better chance to be selected. So this question B, answer B has both coverage and sampling bias. So the choice A is incorrect because it is actually a strong process approach to select the sample, which is randomly select 500 individuals from the university's official directory. So it is a random selection. And so since it's the entire directory, it doesn't have coverage bias. Therefore, A is not does not have error bias. And answer C actually has some coverage bias because it everyone who used the portal in theory would be sampled equally. Therefore, it has coverage bias but not sampling bias. And answer D, use stratified sampling. This is actually the best choice, best approach using stratified sampling so to make sure each group, either demographic group or school or other types of groups would be able to mirror the population. So great effort. Thank you, everyone. And so Karen had a comment says, stratified sampling might be very difficult for those nuanced reasons. That is very true. Thank you. That's a great note. Okay. And now let's keep going. Now let's talk about the second stage, which is when people receive the survey, do they actually complete it? At this stage, two major biases can affect your survey quality, which is self-selection bias and non-response bias. Self-selection bias occurs when certain individuals are more likely to respond to a survey based on their personal experience, attitudes, or opinions, leading to systematic differences between the responders and the non-responders. For example, in surveys about campus IT service, users who have had very positive or very negative experiences, such as encountering repeated issues, they may feel more motivated to participate. This will generate a motivation gap. This gap can skew the survey results toward the more extreme perspectives, more satisfied or extremely dissatisfied, but potentially missing out the opinions of the moderate majority who use the service without too much issues or strong feelings. So the critical question becomes, are we hearing from a representative cross-section or primarily from those most interested or with the strongest feelings? This bias is really related to people's opinions and feelings. So here are some strategies to avoid self-selection bias. The first is to offer small guaranteed incentives, such as a small amount of gift card to all participants rather than a large prizes for a few. This is actually results from this paper. And the second is to frame the survey invitation neutrally to avoid encouraging those who have stronger opinions. For example, you can say, we want to hear from everyone, regardless of your level of satisfaction. And the third way is to consider mandatory participation. So this would definitely increase the response rate and avoid self-selection bias. And the next bias is non-response bias. This is actually more, it happens more often. This occurs when certain demographic groups consistently respond at lower rates, and people who respond differ significantly from those who don't respond to the survey. This is different from self-selection bias, which is based on opinions and feelings. And non-response bias actually creates systematic demographic gaps in your data. For example, students, professors may respond with lower response rate than staff due to competing responsibilities. And this pattern can severely distort your overall finding when the characteristics that relate to non-response relate to your survey questions, like the technical expertise, which is related to the group who respond or not. And if you have this also happens when you have a low response rate overall. You just have like overall low response rate, such as below 50%. That could be a warning flag for non-response bias, which means the people who respond are different from those who didn't. And if you have a response rate of 30% or below, this is widely regarded as carrying higher risk for non-response bias. So even if you have a higher response rate, higher than 50%, you also want to check for demographic differences between the respondents and non-respondents and the invited population. So the non-response rate is mostly focusing on the differences between the responders and non-responders. If they're different, then you have a problem of generalizing your survey results. So the key question to ask to avoid non-response bias is that, are the people who didn't respond systematically different from those who did? So here are some strategies to mitigate non-response bias. The first is the same, which is to offer small incentives. This will definitely increase the response rate. You can also send reminder emails to the underrepresented groups, and you can vary different channels and personalize your communication. Actually, next week, I'm going to do an advanced Qualtrics survey. You can personalize your communication within Qualtrics by addressing their name, and also use a inline text so that you can actually put your question within the survey invitation email. So that could both increase your response rate. And you can also apply post-stratification weighting. So at the end, you've tried everything, you still have a very low response rate that you can't do anything about it by increasing the responses. You can use weight to adjust the imbalance. Any questions about the non-response and self-selection bias? Not, don't see any. So then let's have a third quiz. In a campus IT survey, 15% of undergraduates responded compared to a 45% response rate from graduate students. Which of the following best describes this situation? Just one answer.
And a question did pop into the chat. What would be an example of post-stratification weighting?
Okay, that's actually a topic that we can talk about it for like an hour. An easy way is that, say you have only you have 50-50 male and female in your population, but you only have a quarter of males and 3/4 of females in the responders. Then you can multiply the responses, the males will have a higher weight of so making them 50%, which means every male's response would be a double. You know, one that you have a weight of 2, which means every male have a weight of 2. You count 2 people every male, but female would count all the 75% female actually only count 50%. So every female would have a weight of point, like 2 divided by 3, that would be 0.66. So we can talk about details, but today we don't have, so really based on the frequency to make it so that it mirrors the population proportion. Great question. So I'm going to open the third quiz so you can answer it. Okay. All right, so the correct answer is, have we all finished? For almost a minute. Okay. Correct answer is D. This is non-response bias because of the lower rate by demographic groups, which is undergraduate versus graduate. And the correct answer is D. A is coverage bias because undergrad were not adequately represented in the sampling frame. We actually it didn't mention that, so it is actually not an issue of coverage. Supposedly everyone is included. Sampling bias, the choice B, because the selection method favored graduate students, we did not mention that either. And C, self-selection bias, because students chose to participate on their satisfaction. This actually didn't mention it's a satisfaction survey, and so it is mostly about lower response rate by different demographic groups. So D is a definite correct answer. Definitely. Thank you. You have answered it. Most of you have a correct answer. It's great. So now let's focus on the third stage, which is the focus of today. So when respondents answer your survey questions, if there's a discrepancy between the answers they provide and the true value, we would, if we know the true value, it will result in measurement error. So how does it happen? Cognitive theory states that when respondents answer their survey questions, they're said to go through 4 stages. The first, they will comprehend what's being asked. And second, they will retrieve their information from their memory. And third, it will make a judgment or estimate. And then they will map their judgment onto the response options. Ideally, respondents would move carefully through each stage and answer optimally. However, error could occur at each stage. They may misunderstand the question or struggle to recall the information or make rough estimates or choose socially desirable answers to sensitive questions and distort the answer. So in the next few slides, we'll discuss strategies to minimize measurement error. And the essential question to ask in order to avoid measurement error is, are our survey questions reliable and valid. So what does that mean? Reliability refers to the consistency of your survey questions. If you ask this question again and conduct the survey again, you get the same results. This largely depends on all respondents understanding the question the same way. That's consistency. So questions mean the same to all respondents. So that's reliability. Validity refers to whether your survey question actually measure what you intend to measure. A valid question would accurately capture the concept you're trying to assess. Therefore, a survey question should be both reliable, which is consistent meaning to everyone, and valid, which means accurately capturing what you're trying to ask. So we'll talk about strategies to increase reliability, and 7 strategies and 6 strategies to increase validity. The first, we'll list issues first, and then talk about the strategy. The first issue, we want to avoid jargons, slangs, and abbreviations. Here's an example of a question. The website was clunky and glitchy. This seems, seemingly all right in a verbal conversation, but it is better to make it consistent for everyone to understand it the same way. Therefore, avoid slangs, jargons, or abbreviation. You can say, the website was difficult to use. Use plain language. Everyone will have the same understanding. So avoid jargons. The second is to avoid words with ambiguous meanings. So here's an example. Do you frequently use IT services? You seem to be all right, but you can see that frequency has actually no standard of interpretation. Here is that daily, weekly, everyone will have different opinions about what it means to be frequent. So you want to provide definition. You can say, in a typical week, how many times do you access IT services? And through what channels, like email, help desk, or the AI sandbox. So use definitions to define exactly what you're trying to ask. And third way is to be specific and concrete, which is somewhat similar to previous one, as opposed to general and abstract. Here's an example. How satisfied are you with IT services? Different respondent may focus on different dimensions. Therefore, you want to be specific and concrete and say, please read your experience with the following aspects of IT services, such as speed of issue resolution, clarity, and helpfulness of IT staff. So be specific and concrete. And the fourth way is to ask one thing at a time and avoid double or triple-barreled questions. Here's an example of double-barreled questions. How would you rate the quality of our product and customer service? Whenever you see the word "and" in your question, you want to think about it, whether it is asking about two things. Respondents may be satisfied with one but not the other. They wouldn't be able to answer it. Therefore, you need to ask one question at a time, one specific topic at a time. You can split this into 2 questions. How would you rate the quality of our product? And the second one about customer support. And the fifth way is to avoid questions with double negatives. So here's an example. Do you agree with the following? It is not uncommon for staff to have difficulty accessing shared drives. Well, seemingly all right when you talk about it in daily life, but negatives are a little hard to process. And especially when you answer yes, what does it mean? It could mean, the other way around. Therefore, you want to avoid negative words. You can say, it's common for staff to have difficulty accessing shared drives. And The last aspect is about scales. You want to have word descriptor rather than numbers. You want to label each number in order for everyone to have consistent understanding of each number. Otherwise, everyone will have a different interpretation of the number 2 or 3, especially if you have a scale of 1 to 7 or more scales. And lastly, about the scales, if you have a Likert scale, like going from strongly disagree to disagree, or the other way around, so which do you want positive response first or positive response last? Reviewing the research on the scale order, I haven't found an absolute answer to whichever way is better, but whichever order you choose, use that order consistently to avoid confusing the respondents. Sometimes respondents don't even look at the scales once they see it. That would result in errors in your survey data. So to recap, we talked about 5 areas to avoid to ensure consistent meaning to all respondents in order to increase reliability of answers, to avoid jargons, avoid ambiguous meanings, be specific, avoid double-barreled questions, negative words, and use descriptor and keep the scale consistent. Any questions? Okay, now we have the 4th quiz. What is wrong with the following IT survey question? Multiple answers possible. During the past year, did you experience IT issues? Okay. Another 5 seconds. Okay. So the correct answers are A and B, and most of you have answered it correctly. IT issues is a vague term. One person might think it might be not being able to log into an email, while another person may think it's major system outages. So without being specific about types of issues, respondents may interpret the question differently. So answer A is correct. And B, past year is ambiguous. It could be past 12 month or past calendar year. That is very true. So B is correct. And C, this is a double-barrel question. Actually, it is only asking about IT issues in a certain time frame. So it is not a double-barrel question. And D, the question doesn't specify whether issue is resolved or ongoing. And actually, if you do want to ask that question, it would be a separate question. You don't want to ask 2 things at once. So D is not, shouldn't be the correct answer. E, and certainly there is something wrong, so E is not correct. The correct answers are A and B. You've done a great job and right. Okay, and another question. What's wrong with the following IT survey questions. This again, multiple choices. Would you like HUIT services to be faster and more user-friendly? I'll give you the place to answer it. Okay, another 5 seconds. All right. So the correct answers are A and B. Indeed, it is a double-barreled question. Faster and user-friendly, these are two different things. And two different things. You're asking two things at once. So this is double-barreled. A is the correct answer. And choice B, faster and user-friendly, could mean different things to different people. That is also true. Whether faster responses or faster speed in terms of solving issues. So it does it's not very specific, therefore, and also different. Therefore, you want to make it the same for everyone to understand it the same way. So A and B is correct. And C, the question assumes everyone wants improvement in both areas. That's actually not not a strong issue. Of course, everyone wants improvement in both areas. So C is not a strong answer. And this is a leading question, encourages positive response. It's somewhat a little bit leading, but it is true that faster, which means it's already fast. Do you want it faster? It is a little bit correct, but it's not like a strong leading question. But I could understand those who answer D. And E is not correct. Great. All right, so let's move on to the last stage, which is to how to increase the survey question validity to ensure answers correspond to what they are intended to measure. So here, we'll specify the issues first. The first issue is leading questions that pushes respondent toward an answer. So here's an example of a leading question. Most staff find the new help desk system very efficient. How would you rate its efficiency? This is already telling respondents that, okay, other people, this must be a popular opinion. I better follow that, even if they don't agree with it initially. So therefore, the internal validity of the study can be compromised by stating the first sentence. So the solution is to ask questions without prompts. Just have to say, how would you rate the efficiency of the new help desk? And loaded question is a tricky one, so it pushes respondents towards something they may not agree with. So here's an example. Would you continue to recommend our outstanding IT support team? And how helpful did you find our friendly and knowledgeable IT staff? So no matter how respondent answer, they're saying something they may or may not agree with. Therefore, it is better to ask the question with a neutral statement without positive prompts. You can say, would you continue to recommend our IT support? How helpful did you find our IT staff? The third issue is a big one, social desirability bias. So This occurs when respondents adjust their answers to appear more socially acceptable rather than reporting truthfully. Respondents typically over-report positive behaviors, such as studying, or under-report negative ones, such as mental health issues, which will threaten data validity. This bias affects questions about sensitive topics particularly. And the way to address this issue first is to use anonymous survey and keep it anonymous. Then they will, honestly report. But what if you have to keep it anonymous, but also give a gift card at the end, or give everyone a small incentive, a gift card? If you do it within the same survey page, that would actually the honesty, it can compromise honesty, because they are revealing their email at the end. Therefore, the best way is to use a separate survey for contact information. I'm gonna actually next video, when I talk about advanced Qualtrics, I'll cover how to set it so you can have two separate surveys, where the second one is for people to enter their email address. This will still keep the survey anonymous. The second way, if you can't keep it anonymous, you can keep it confidential. So that you could say that it's not going to be revealed to anyone outside of the department or the office. And the third is to minimize a sense of judgment by using neutral language and by stating that it's all right. For example, if you ask, did you report all suspicious emails to HUIT? And sometimes if you say that people don't always report every suspicious email, about how many times did you report? So this would allow respondent to honestly report the truthful response without responding like socially desirable answer. Yes, I reported all suspicious emails, things like that. So, so the fourth issue is with cognitive load. Remember, respondents have to go through the 4 stages to respond to your survey question. But if they're in a hurry and they don't have time or not interested in the survey, they may skip through all of these without truly making the correct judgment or pulling it from their memory and report the correct answer. This is called satisficing. You're just like making it okay, just satisfactory answer, not optimal answer. To avoid this issue with cognitive load, you want to reduce the difficulty of the survey and to reduce the cognitive load so they won't skip through and then give you a wrong answer or not optimal answer. And you want to avoid complex syntax like this one. It's really very difficult to answer this question, like to what extent do you agree with that given these, that your overall satisfaction is primarily influenced, but it's really difficult to answer. But you can simplify it, then they'll read it. Have factors like system availability, network speed, strongly influence how satisfied you are. Therefore, reduce the cognitive load. Use as few words as possible. And another way is to increase the motivation by specifying how important the survey is. So in the email invitation, your survey, or the introductory text, you want to specify how important it is. This will engage the respondents much more. And related to the same topic, which is cognitive load, there's an issue of primacy effect. It's called primacy effect, which means if you have a long list of response options, This will require a lot of cognitive process to choose one answer out of this entire list. Then research actually shows that some respondents will skim through the first few and answer like satisfactory answer, and not even look at the bottom ones. To mitigate this issue of primacy effect, you want to randomize. If you really have to have a long list, you want to randomize the order of the items. This will ensure that even though individual respondent may satisfy in choosing the response, but with a large enough sample, this primacy effect will be washed out by this distribution across a set of response options. And the last is about keeping your survey options collectively exclusive, which means everyone would have some box to check. So you want to cover all possible answers in your list. If you just list all the way through here confluence, you may not be inclusive of all the possible choices. Then you can add other. And what if I don't use any of these platforms? You can say none of the above. So everyone have a place to check. This way, you know how many actually looked at the survey, this question, and answered this one. This way, you can actually summarize what percent answered each choice. So to recap, we talked about 7 ways to boost question validity. Avoid leading questions, avoid loaded questions, avoid socially desirable bias, and reduce cognitive load. Randomize your to avoid primacy effect, and make response options collectively exhaustive. Any questions? Okay, now I have another question for you. What's wrong with the following survey question? And multiple answers possible. Do you find the excellent UI and UX of the new dashboard have made your work much easier than the old system? I'm going to give you the give you another 5 seconds. Okay. All right, so the correct answers are A, B, and C. I think you've done a great job. The first one, A, is UI and UX actually are jargons, and so not everyone understand. Of course, if it's all IT, you may all understand. This is just an example. And B, this question is double-barreled, yes. And there's a word "and" in it, and indeed it is asking about 2 things. And the question is leading. The new dashboard, the excellent UI and UX. So it is a leading question. D is not the correct answer. Okay. All right, so here. So here to recap, we went over biases that could occur at each stage of the survey process. When you send out the survey, and when respondents decide to complete the survey, and the third stage is how they reply to the questions. We summarized questions to ask in order to avoid these different biases and errors. All right, well, congratulations for finishing all the quizzes, and thank you for all of your engaged participation today. And I hope these strategies for reducing bias at each stage will make an immediate difference in your research or work. And remember, any small improvement can make significant change and gains in your data quality. And thank you, everyone. And now we can have 3 minutes of.
Oh, Linda, we did have a question come into the chat amongst all the thank yous. But is there any advice on the optimal length of a survey? And the same question regarding the frequency or a recurring survey?
Length of the question, we know we have seen actually the response rate for each question actually declines throughout the survey. So you do see the longer, so there's not like a set of required length or like a short, how short it is. The shorter, the better. That is definitely true. But if you could address this survey and emphasize the importance of the survey, actually the decline of the response rate for each survey question item is not that dramatic. It does indeed decline, but addressing the importance of the survey can increase the response rate dramatically. So make it so that it's so valuable to answer the survey. Make it that. So to me, I think that's the important thing. We attached our survey to a requirement for students, and we got 8% response or 90% response rate. And it's so there's not a set number. Yeah. And about the second question, I think something regarding frequency or a recurring survey. Same question regarding frequency.
Yeah, the frequency of a recurring survey, like again, it's probably hard to characterize this, but like, should you survey people every month, every year? I suppose it depends on the situation.
Yeah, so definitely there's a survey fatigue.
Yeah, survey fatigue. Yeah, that's what. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, definitely. You do want to watch out. Right now, it's better to know like how many surveys are going out and pick a time that they are free, like they have time, like students during their break, and so.
Thank you.
The importance of the survey and attaching a survey to a required step or thing, that's like that would definitely help a lot. And also addressing personalize your survey, which I'm going to talk about next week.
And Kellen has a hand raised. Kellen, if you want to ask your question.
Yes.
I'm sorry about an accident, but I apologize.
Oh, no problem.
And then one more question in the chat around any concerns around quality of responses when participation is mandatory. And someone also added into that is, that potential risk of people putting in a response just to get the task done.
Yeah, that is actually, so one way to address that, if you have some really important questions, you can actually ask the question using two separate questions to address in order to get the real response, to see if they actually are consistent. That's one way to test it. Like overall satisfaction, you want to ask another way, like would you recommend it to another to others? Yeah, to check the quality of the responses. There's not a clear way to actually say that they responded optimally. It is really hard to detect whether they did it optimally. But what you would do is to make it so that it's important and simplify your questions. And check for consistency of the answers.
I think that's all of our questions
Yeah.
in chat. Thank you, everyone. And thank you again, Linda, for such an awesome, informative session. And we will be getting the recording posted in a few, in the coming days, and we'll share that out with folks as well.
Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.